Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April, in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, "If the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light. 1, if by land, and 2, if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be, ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm, for the country folk to be up and to arm. A hurry of hooves in a village street, a shape in the moonlight, a bulk in the dark, and beneath from the pebbles in passing a spark, struck out by a steed flying fearless and fleet. That was all, and yet, through the gloom and the light, the fate of a nation was riding that night. And the spark struck out by that steed in his flight kindled the land into flame with its heat. You know the rest. In the books you have read, how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball from behind each fence and farmyard wall, chasing the redcoats down the lane, then crossing the fields to emerge again under the trees at the turn of the road and only pausing to fire and load. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear, a voice in the darkness, a knock at the door, and a word that shall echo forevermore. For born on the night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will waken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere. This Shabbat marks 250 years since that fabled ride of Paul Revere, memorialized in Longfellow's 1903 poem. 250 years since the Battle of Lexington and Concord and the shot heard round the world that ignited the American Revolutionary War and a wave of democratic revolutions in its wake, with ripples still felt round the world today. And this Shabbat is also the 7th day of Passover, and our Torah reading for the end of the holiday, like the Haggadot we read at its beginning, recalls the familiar story of the Israelites' ride out of Egypt. The great cry heard throughout Mitzrayim at midnight, the defiant flight on land through sea, and Moses led them to freedom from tyranny. Both of these foundational narratives of freedom have shaped and continue to shape the history of the world, and they shape our consciousness as Jewish Americans. Recited year after year in schools and in shuls, each new set of students receives the stories of an increasingly distant past in the context of their increasingly different present, and they make them their own, eventually becoming the teachers whose retellings will form the next generation's understandings in turn. The power of these founding texts derives from their being passed down lador vador, from generation to generation. The words of the stories themselves don't change, but the ways we tell them and the ways we interpret them do. The meanings we make of these words grow and change along with us, so that these stories are not merely preserved in being passed down, but kept alive. Now, tucked away in the 3rd verse of the Torah portion we read today is a quiet little moment that actually encapsulates this whole story. After the powerful plagues and before the splitting sea, as the Israelites frantically pack their belongings and prepare to flee, we read in Exodus 13:19, Moses took with him the bones of Joseph, who had exacted an oath from the children of Israel, saying, Pakod yifkod Elohim etchem. God will be sure to take notice of you, and then you shall carry up my bones from here with you. We don't read about Moses making matzah in this moment or packing extra sandals for the long journey ahead. No, he goes looking for the bones of a long-dead ancestor, an ancestor he didn't even know he had, by the way, until very recently in the story. fulfill a 500-year-old promise made by Joseph's reformed fratricidal brothers on behalf of unknown generations to come. How would Moses have known about this oath? And why was fulfilling it so critically important at this moment in the story? To answer these questions, we have to go back to the final verses of Genesis, which are also the final words of Joseph, spoken to his family all gathered and living together in Egypt. We read in Genesis 50, Joseph said to his brothers, "I'm about to die, but God will surely take notice of you, ve'Elohim pakod yifkod etchem, and bring you up from this land to the land promised on oath to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." And Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, "Pakod yifkod Elohim etchem, when God has taken notice of you, you shall surely carry my bones up from here." Now, whenever we see repetitive words in Torah, it's a good hint that we should perk up our ears and take note. Joseph uses a particular phrase twice, one which repeats the same verb in it for emphasis. Pakod yifkod, God will surely take note. Joseph says it himself, then he makes his brothers repeat it in an oath. Pakod yifkod. So what's the significance of this root's fourfold repetition? It's not immediately apparent here, but if we take the hint and we pakod, if we take notice of the word, we'll hear it again at the beginning of the book of Exodus, when many generations later, God appears to Moses at the burning bush and tells him, "Go and assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, Adonai, the God of your father's house, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me and said, Pakod pakadati etchem, I have taken note of you, and I've declared I will take you out of the misery of Egypt to a land flowing with milk and honey, and the people will listen to you." And sure enough, in Exodus 4, Moses and Aaron went and assembled all the elders of the Israelites. Aaron repeated all the words that God had spoken to Moses, and the assembly was convinced when they heard that God had taken note of the Israelites. Ki fakad Adonai et bnei Israel. Notice, same verb coming back, same repetition. God says, "Say this," and the Israelites will listen. And then they actually do, which is quite remarkable for the Israelites. So it's like we've stumbled on a secret password, an Easter egg, if you will. And it's not just us. We see the same idea reflected in the classical Midrashim in Shmo Rabbah and Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer as well. But it's so remarkable that from one generation to the next, the Israelites passed down these words which certainly meant something to Joseph and his brothers, but we might imagine that the generational game of telephone garbled their significance, such that by the time Moses floats down the Nile in his little basket, Joseph's enslaved great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren may have no idea why these particular words their parents have told them are so important, until one day, man shows up looking very in charge and says, "Pakod pakadati," and suddenly the words in the back of their consciousness come roaring to the forefront, and the past and the present and the future all click together in an instant. But now imagine what would have happened if one of those generations, far removed from Joseph but long before Moses, couldn't find any meaning in these dusty old words and didn't bother to pass them along. Moses could have come along and pakod pakadati'd all he wanted, but there wouldn't have been that lightning bolt of recognition, of relevance in the moment that it was destined for, in that moment when it was most needed. And so the Israelites packed their bags in their long-awaited moment of redemption, and Moses brings out the bones of Joseph, the embodiment of those words of promise and hope that sustained the Israelites in Egypt, even though none of them could have predicted the moment in which they'd finally be fulfilled. The hundreds of generations of the Jewish people who have lived and died since these words of Torah were written have largely kept up this practice, steadfastly passing down an ever-increasing collection of words in the form of sacred tomes and liturgical texts, along with rituals, mitzvot, language, and literature that forms the body of Jewish civilization. This is an important and slightly terrifying part of what it means to be Jewish. Having a responsibility to this chain of tradition, of transmission, making sure that the words and the stories and the practices are passed down, because we can never predict which ones 5 generations from now will be their secret, sacred password, their pakod pakadati that parts the seas to their future promised land. You know, I didn't grow up around here near Boston. I only know the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere because my dad used to recite it for me. 1 if by land, 2 if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be. I don't know where he learned this. I don't know why he liked it so much or why he taught it to me. But if he hadn't, I wouldn't have had it in the moment when I suddenly needed it, giving a Shabbat Pesach sermon in Wellesley, Massachusetts on the 250th anniversary of the start of the American Revolutionary War. It was there rattling around in the back of my head, and when I took it out and dusted it off, I discovered something that I never realized in the last stanza. So through the night rode Paul Revere, a voice in the darkness, a knock at the door, and a word that shall echo forevermore. But the poem doesn't actually tell us what the word that shall echo forevermore is. It's left like an open door, beckoning us to come inside and find out what it is. Our Jewish tradition, our heritage, is a gift that has been passed down to us across hundreds and hundreds of generations. It is ancient, it is vast, it can be confusing and challenging, but it is rich, filled with countless words of wisdom and insight in its teachings and practices that have spoken to and sustained our people in times of joy and despair for thousands of years. They're all there, waiting for us and for the generations to follow, like an open door. But we have to step through the door. We have to learn those words and practice those rituals and make them our own so that we can discover meaning in them and so that they will still be there for those who come after us to make their own meanings of them in turn. We are that voice in the darkness. Each one of us is the knock at the door, carrying a word that will echo forevermore, but we don't always know what that word is. We won't know what the pakod yifkod, what that secret sacred password will be that we and only we can share, that will carry the meaning and the message that in the hour of darkness and peril and need, people will waken and listen to hear. And so we are called to study and to practice, to learn and to teach. We are called to take our tradition, all of our tradition, not just the parts that are easy and that feel nice, but also the parts that are difficult, the stuff that we don't fully understand, to wrestle with it and make it our own, so that when the moment comes, maybe generations from now, the word that's needed isn't beyond reviving. It's still alive in our people's mouths, ready to serve the purpose for which it was made. A voice in the darkness, a knock at the door, and a word that shall echo forevermore. For born on the night wind of the past through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will waken and listen to hear the meaning passed down in word and in deed from the tradition which we hold dear. Chag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom. Yasher Koach.
We are gifts, and we are blessings. We are history in song. We are hope, and we are healing. We are learning to be strong. We are words, and we are stories. We are pictures of the past. We are carriers of wisdom, not the first and not the last. L'dor vador nagid god lecha. L'dor vador we protect this chain. From generation to generation, l'dor vador, these lips will praise your name.
Treatise of the sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring.
Looking back on the journey that we carry in our hearts, the shadow of the mountain to the waters that would part. We are blessed and we are holy. We are children of your way. And the words that bring us meaning, we will have the strength to say. L'dor vador nagid god lecha. L'dor vador we protect this chain. From generation to generation, l'dor vador, these lips will praise